my father rented a plantation from the doctor, the family doctor. This plantation was in the woods. It was a log house, big 3-room log house in the woods, and it had a large black walnut tree behind behind the house, and in the fall and winter the black walnuts were always popping down on the house and rolling off on the ground. I expect we could have they did pick up more than a barrel full of black walnuts and shell the hulls off and dry them and eat them through the winter and candy and pies and so forth. But anyway, we lived there. I was born there in November 25th, 1893, and my sister Catherine was born there in this log house August 11th, 1895. And then Daddy and Mother had wanted a boy, got a girl. I was the first child, and I was a girl, and then they wanted a boy and got my sister Catherine another girl. They were disappointed, so they tried again for a boy, and sure enough, the doctor told them the next one would be a boy. So the boy was to come in the year 1897, October 1897. The doctor said he'd be there. So my father had farmed on this plantation since they were married in January 1893, and he decided he wanted to plant a little farm of his own. And so the doctor had a little farm over on the Winnfield Road about 2 good miles from Montgomery in Grant Parish, and he wanted to sell it. So my daddy asked him what he would take for it, and he told him he'd take 3 bales of cotton for it, which amounted to about $1,500. At that time, you could get about $500 for a bale of cotton. So Dad gave him the 3 bales of cotton that he made that year on the plantation, the little farm that he had rented from him for this place. It was 89 acres of it, and it had a nice big pasture, and it was well laid out for drainage, and it had a nice field, and it was fenced, and there was just a partition fence between it and my Grandma Lyons' place, my father's mother's little farm. And so it was close enough that we could walk to Montgomery to school when we got old enough to go. We weren't old enough to go then. And so my father planned to move there in February 1897, which they did. And the doctor told him to put Catherine and me on the little bed in the back of the wagon and not to let Mother hold either one of us on her lap, and to move her over real easy and get her out of the wagon real easy, because she might lose the baby. So Dad did that, and we got moved over, and I remember we had a little square willow. It was about a foot square, and Dad had to take the casing out and put new casing in to get water for us to drink. And some of the neighbor men was helping. I can remember now just how it all looked, and there was a mud chimney to the north end of the house, and we had a nice big fireplace, and nice 2 big nice rooms, and a nice big front porch, and Dad built a room clear across the west side of it for a kitchen and a dining room and a water place to have the wash bowl and the drinking water. And so Dad was very busy that year. He made a little crop of his own and helped Grandmother to take care of her crop, because his father had died long years before. And so the year rolled on, and in October, the baby was due by the 13th of October. So Mother told Daddy to get us up and get us dressed and take us up to the river plantation to her mother, to Grandma Barfield, and get her to keep us until the baby came. So Dad did that, and so I walked all the way, and it was just about a couple of miles, and most of it was through wooded land. And Dad carried Catherine up on his shoulder. And when we got to the opening where the cottages were, where the plantation hands and their families lived, we met my Uncle Jack Barfield and my Uncle Jack Taylor on horses, and I can still hear those pretty leather saddles squeaking. And you know how new leather squeaks, and so they were riding horseback, and the horses looked pretty and slick and clean, and the saddles looked like they were brand new, both of them. And Uncle Jack Taylor told my father that he was going out to tell Tiny, which they called my mother. Her name was Augustine, but they called her Tiny. And he was going out to tell Tiny goodbye, that he had to leave that night on the boat for New Orleans to go to the Philippine Islands. The United States was about to get into the Spanish-American War. So he told, my father told him to go ahead, that the baby wasn't there yet, and that it would be some time before the baby came, and they could go ahead and be visiting with Tiny, and he'd take us up to my grandmother, and then he'd be right out shortly. So they went ahead out to see my mother and tell her goodbye, and my father took us up to grandmother's, and so grandmother told my father to tell Tiny that she would be out in the afternoon to see her and help her. And so my father went back home, and so my grandmother rushed the noon meal and got through with it, and she put the saddle on her pony and got on her pony and told grandfather to come and see about us and see that we stayed on the bed and took a nap, Aunt Minnie and Aunt Tavy and Catherine and me. So grandfather...
What kind of a saddle was it?
Grandfather came and looked about us. Now, grandmother's side saddle was a beautiful leather, kind of a yellow leather side saddle, had a horn up on one side, and this saddle was quilted. It was a beautiful saddle. I wish many times that I could have kept that saddle and had it until yet, but its worldly treasures are hard to keep and take care of. So anyway, grandmother came back from my mother's about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and my Aunt Minnie Barfield jumped down off of the bed and ran out to meet her as she was taking the saddle off of her horse and hanging it up on the porch. They had large nails or things in the wall of the porch to hang the saddles to, which they did. And so my Aunt Minnie asked her if the baby had came, and she said, yes, tell the girls they have a little baby brother, and they've named him James Henry. And so we asked Aunt Tavy, well, what was the difference in a boy and a girl baby? And she said, well, says a girl is a female and a boy is a male. She said, we said, well, I still don't know what the difference is. And she said, well, I can't tell you what the difference is now. You'll have to wait until you get old enough and large enough to find out that for yourself. So we didn't find out what the difference in the little baby brother and ourselves was then. So anyway, well, grandmother came in and told us that mother was just fine, and that the stork had brought the baby and was a little baby brother, and that she, the next day, that she would take us, put her horses to the surrey. You know, a surrey is a two-seated buggy, and it has fringe around the top. And it's two horses to it, and a nice little way to go if you didn't have an automobile, which they didn't have in those days. So anyway, grandmother told us she'd take us home the next day, and we could see the baby. So the next day came, and grandmother put the ponies to this surrey and put us all four in and drove out to my home, our home, and we jumped out of the surrey and went running in to see the mother and the baby, and we kissed our mother and wanted to see the little baby, and grandmother held us up and let us look over in the bed at the little baby. And so that was my brother James Henry Hickman. He was born the 13th day of October, 1897, I remember that day as well as if it was yesterday. And so my grandmother then went back home and took Aunt Minnie and Aunt Tavia, and then she came regularly to see my mother. And in the meantime, my Uncle Jack Taylor went to the Philippine Islands, and so he got spinal meningitis while he was there, and it affected his mind pretty bad, but he finally got to come home to his home in Montgomery, Louisiana, and he lived with my mother and my father part of the time, and with my grandfather part of the time. And so my little brother grew up then, and then that was their mother and daddy's third child. It was a boy, and they were very proud of him. And so the railroad trains, LRN, had come through there, and my daddy was pretty proud of the boy. And then in 1900, Mother discovered there was another baby on the way, and that was my sister Annie Lou. She was born on April 30th, 1900. And then my sister Hilda Vera, came on the 20th of August, 1903. And then my brother Jackson Lee came on the 23rd of July, 1905. And then my sister Myra came the 4th of June, 1909. And then my brother Thomas O'Leet came the 12th of June, 1912. And that was all of the children my mother and father had. And I remember where we all went when the children were to be born, and I had to stand up on a box and cook the meals for my father when my sister Annie was born in 1900. I had to wash the diapers, I had to milk the cows, I had to stand on a box and do the cooking. I couldn't see on top of the stove. But I could bake potatoes and make biscuits and fry bacon and make coffee. And ever since that time, I've been a working person. I've cooked a many meal and made a many pot of coffees. And that's the tale of my sisters and brothers and myself. And I hope you will excuse my language and my slowness, but I'll think of something else to tell you maybe. Goodbye.